speaker is Dr. Zabta Shinwari. Dr. Shinwari is the Vice Chancellor of Kohat University of Science and Technology. One of his major achievements is to extend higher education facilities to the neglected communities of Pakistan, especially to female. He also established University of Science and Technology, Bannu. He is the founder of KUST, Institute of Medical Sciences, KIMS. Dr. Shinwari's interest is molecular systematics, bioethics, and biotechnology. He is the vice chairman of the World Commission of Ethics in Scientific Knowledge and Technology since 2016. He is focal person of Alliance of International Science Organization in China. Dr. Shinwari, please. Dr. Shinwari.
Mute. He is muted. He is muted.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm on mute now.
No, you are okay now.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Trying to. Oh my gosh. Can you see my screen now?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excellent talk since morning. First of all, on the onset, let me thank Islamic World Academy of Sciences, His Excellency Princess Al Hassan, Dr. Adnan Badran. I visited him several times in his Just University, and I really appreciate Jordan for its vigilance and a lot of good scientific activities. Dr. Abdullah, thank you to you that you invited me, and my friends in COMSTECH, Iqbal Chaudhry, and everybody, organizers. What I'm going to talk to you since morning, it is really a very good event today. In fact, everybody said when I heard Prince Al Hassan, I think he said everything. And that was good enough for us, food for thought to just explore it. So that in a way will help me to try to reduce my speaking time by ignoring some of the slides that I have for you. So, and we'll be keeping those that were just missing since morning. So if we look at the global risk today, what I'm going to talk about is little more about the result of biodiversity loss in infectious disease spreading. You saw this one example of corona. This was because so far there are various theories, but the most common is that it came from bats through a middle animal that was from the wild, eaten by Chinese, and then adopted itself to the human. And we have seen that more than 2 million people died and $28 trillion loss of the global economy. Then the livelihood crisis, people talk about it, poverty and everything, extreme weather, cyber security, digital inequality. These are the risks the global risks that we are faced with. And one of the most common is the mass poverty. So I will try to skip talk about climate change and we'll go more. This is what my very good friend Syed Mahmood Nasser, when he was talking about glacier melting. You know, the very recent one of the event took place in Siberia when the glaciers were made. One frozen 2,000-year-old reindeer grazing when that was frozen, that melted, and it has given up anthrax that killed a 12-year-old boy, as well as some animals that spread there. So that glaciers are a very good preservers for microbes and viruses, because it is dark, because it has no oxygen. So there they spread a lot. And when it is melted, you get it as a gift. So that is what you should remember. And this is the story that I put a slide now when I heard Mahmoud Nasser, when he was taught, he's a very, very intellectual person. We Pakistanis are proud of him. He had done a lot of good things. And Professor Asghar, he guided me in preparing my presentation this time. I'm skipping this slide, rise in the global temperature, everything. Since morning, we are hearing all about it. We heard about biodiversity, but I would little more say 3 words only. That when we talk about biodiversity, we are focused with ecosystem and species diversity. We rarely talk about the genetic diversity, the gene diversity. That is really one of the major things that we need to focus. Like Dr. Adnan Badnan has a very relevant talk at the end, the question, the comment that he had. You know, I'm worried that now Saudi Arabia announced some 10 billion tree or something. But I'm worried that they will focus on fast-growing, imported, exotic species, which will really destroy rather than preserving the nature, their own indigenous flora. These are the mistakes that global we had in Pakistan too. That we had imported some species that has really disturbed our own, biodiversity. Number of species, there is a lot of talk about it. So, but the estimate is that there are 10 to 50 billion species. It has not been really, we have just have a tip of iceberg that we have identified few species so far, close to, 2 million only. But there are actually, a rough estimate is 10 to 50 million species in the world that we really have to explore it. One more thing that I would like to focus is the human footprint. No wild area left. This crazy human, Homo sapien, has invaded everywhere. 77% of land, excluding Antarctica, and 87% of ocean had been modified by human activity so far. And the last, we go for 100 years, there is a data of that only 15% of Earth surface 100 years ago was used to grow crops. And now today, 77% of land has been disturbed. So that is what His Excellency, the human, is going with the natural environment. This is the extinction pattern in the world. The last speaker had an excellent talk about it. This is the global trend that we are seeing what's happening. So, but when we say global trend, so here we can see even today there was this is today's article in Guardian. What they said, the forest loss in last 20 years. Last 2020 was the most destructive year in the last 20 years. That had I'm talking about specifically this tropical region. That 12.2 million hectare tree cover last in 2020. There are some good news also about Indonesia and Malaysia. They tried that they had reversed that loss, and they had been trying to save their whatever is left there. Again, this is a data that was since morning we were talking how many percent of which group of organisms are threatened with extinction, from amphibians to mammals. So again, we heard a lot about it, so we're going forward. And when we talk about, COVID, we should also remember very sensitive region of the world, that is Hindu Kush Himalaya. That Mahmoud Nasser may have more knowledge about it, but 250 million people, they are living, and 70% of them are directly dependent on nature. Secondly, all the rivers that are coming down are because of those glaciers that we are having. So the loss of this region will really disturb a huge number of, you can call it 3 billion people of the world that has somehow dependent on this one bigger mountain region. And then when we talk about the biodiversity increase or decrease, what this says is that species multiply as Earth heat up. So there is a lot of called a speciation in a way, but we have to talk about quality versus quantity. So warming produces both extensions and origination. So that is what happens. And that is why when we go to the microorganism, one lady from Jordan was talking very good thing that we rarely talk about it. A small piece of soil 2 centimeter have thousands of microbes in a very rich area. So there is that we have to really focus on them also. Secondly, we should remember there's not the number, and then sometimes we have to have the keystone species that are very important for preservation or sort of saving him from the extinction, because it surrounds a sort of the whole system there. They have a key role in the ecosystem that they play. I will not be talking much about invasive species, but we should remember examples of South Africa, for example. They lost $450 million US because of just invasive species, mistakes of introduction of alien species. And some of the estimates for some of the countries close to $100 billion US because of this unwise introduction of invasive species. And it also loses a lot of water from the ground, 100 million liters per day in a case of in one city. So if you do that, so there is that, these are the lessons learned that we should remember. Again, biodiversity loss and ecosystem functions, since morning we are hearing it. So we should remember it's not only few things that we are talking about. I will be mainly focusing on some of the infectious species, infectious diseases that we are getting. So when we say the reduced biodiversity, with this you get a lot of invasive species that jumps in and they occupies that space. So there is that we should remember an example that if you lose some of the small mammals, you get a lot of leishmaniasis, and you may have this in the whole Bimena region that the human through sandfly that they are getting. And this is one of the reasons of the biodiversity loss. So when we talk about all this, can we save this earth? And there are some of the questions and to fix the problem. One is you need more food. You are producing a lot of human beings, a lot of population growth. So you need more food for the people. Now, what will you do? You will expand agriculture since we are listening, or you should do use the technology and get more fruit from less land. This is the solution. And secondly, overfishing. We should use technology to harvest only the needed species or the needed group that we need. What we do is we catch unneeded species and we make them endangered. This is how we have to fix it, that we have to use technology. And again, increase clean energy, green energy. That is that the world have to shift their energy needs to the clean energy. At least 85% of it should be coming from the clean energy. And one more thing that my topic title was the frontier technology, climate change and biodiversity. There are countries that they are advocating about geoengineering of the climate, sucking carbon dioxide artificially from the climate, or having aerosols that can, suck other undesired compounds from the environment. And that is, but we have to really be very, careful about this. This may have more harm than good because of, you don't know when you intervene in something, you may destroy altogether the whole earth. That's another caution that we have to think about it. So the human extension, if we as a whole planet, we may be really destroying ourselves. One is the poverty number will increase because the food will not be enough for the people that we have or we will be having. We will be having a lot of pests on the crop. We will be having several things that we should remember that by 2050, what can happen. And the diseases variety of pandemic, rightly said by Iqbal Chaudhry, this is not the first and the last one. We have to prepare ourselves what can happen next. And as I said earlier, the permafrost that we have, it's a very good preserver of microbes, viruses, and bacteria. So if you destroy this, you may face problem in the future. And this is, again, you may have heard a lot about the population growth rate that we are having. Specifically, the less developed country, or you can call it middle and low income countries, look at their growth rate that they are having in human population. So I'm skipping this slide again. We listen a lot about it, but the agricultural productivity and global warming, how can we really alter and how can we help in having less land and more agriculture produced, using less water and having more agriculture produced, how to reduce so this is a rather crowded picture, but this is a strategy that we can really work on, and we can really see what are the problems with agriculture that we are producing and how can we help them to really save it. Just important, some of the, because I work on herbal medicine and of course biodiversity, you can call it, use this one amphibian species that is used, and we get one compound ziconitide, and it's 1,000 times more potent than morphine, and this is used in extreme cancer and AIDS patient. But and we are losing the species. So imagine, it's not only other uses that since morning we are hearing from the biodiversity, it is the human survival sort of medicine that are coming from these biodiversity species that we have. Alkaloids from a frog. There are many compounds that we get and we use for this is another example in the traditional knowledge that we get for cancer. We use, turmeric and animals, scorpions, venom, and we produce something for their extreme patient. This is a plant from Pakistan that was recently a study in UK for breast cancer, excellent compound extracted from this plant species. And this is in every area in our west of Pakistan. But we are really throwing it away. I give you an example of some of the ephedra species. We were having a very good ephedrine from it, but we sold it on a pennies, you can call it, since 1990. We were in the top 10 exporting countries of crude herbs. We get less money and we destroyed this all came from the wild. So there is what we do. And if we use the modern technology, like nanotechnology, we get a lot of now, there are modern technology used to get more compounds from a less element in a smaller quantity that theranostics and, in the medicine that helps us. My lab is now working on the modern technologies and we get a lot of good compounds from this. So, and the Indian, that Ayurvedic medicine they get from it. This is one of the super ants that gives the next generation antibiotic, because antibiotic is one of our problem, our pathogen, they are resistant, they are having resistance to antibiotic, and we need more ways and means to get this. So this is one of the ants that we can get it. I give you an example of one of the animal, a small animal that is that feeds on the eggs of the pest in Hawaiian area. And if you lose this, the farmers buy this one, they throw it on their field, and it kills the whole, the pest over there. So now come to the modern technology, synthetic biology. There are labs that they are working on they say, we will revive the nature. We can have even the technology now to somehow help and have those dinosaurs back in the environment, or many more. So there is also the danger. We were worrying for GM crops. This is more dangerous if we misuse it. There are many good things of synthetic biology, but there will be a lot of impact on the biodiversity. IUCN Pakistan had a meeting, and I remember I presented data that they can destroy the nature too, and very quickly. So that we should remember it. Thirdly, I will be talking about the Spanish flu, for example. Some of the labs are trying to recreate it. We already have synthetic polio virus, and we are trying to have Spanish flu recreated by some of the American labs. So what will happen? You remember, if you all know a little bit about it, in 1918, it killed millions of people, more than Corona killed now. So that is that we scientists, we have to be having ethics. I work for UNESCO, COMSTECH, I'm vice chair of that. We work on the ethics of science and technology, that what can happen. So if we cut it short, the biodiversity has impact on emergence and transmission of infectious diseases. And there are several examples in the next slide. I can, 335 infectious diseases emerged in last 64 years. And these 60% was zoonotic pathogen, origin of it. And this was all because of biodiversity loss and because they were looking for alternate host. And we human are providing ourselves, offering ourselves as a good host because very rich from inside. So that is that we will be really suffering. The diseases and the diversity, they have a close link with each other. If you are changing your microbiomes in your body, there you have thousands of bacteria lives symbiotically in your body. If you change it, it will really, it has a lot of problems that we are facing really now too. Just a couple of words about Pakistan. Pakistan is the only country that stretches from 0 meter to 8,611 meters. No other country in the world. We have Everest in Nepal, but we don't have the beautiful Punjab and Sindh and plains and the sea level that we have. So this is the best kind of an experiment land that Allah has given it to us, and we have to really work hard. But what we are doing, if you look at the Human Development Index of Pakistan, all the biodiversity rich area people are the poorest. And that is that we can ask them to keep these trees. These are very good for us, but we don't feed them. We don't give them alternative for their income, etc. So we have to think for the future if we really want to conserve our environment, etc. Look at these forest-based communities. In Pakistan, they are marginalized from the mainstream. They don't have the modern, even electricity, etc. So if we want to save it, and they still, we have to show them solidarity with them. They are the most vulnerable for climate change too. If there is a flood, the poorest are the sufferer. If there is more rain, the poorest are. If there is no rain, they are suffering. So this is what we have to think about them. One more thing that I would like to talk about is the poverty and terrorism link of the biodiversity and all this. We may clump it with in my region specifically in the poverty is playing a major role. And if we not, there is a data that hunger kills more people than HIV, TB, malaria, and many diseases. People, because of hunger, they are dying more. So what we can do, like His Excellency said in the morning, business as usual, we will live our life and the next one will be facing it. Or we have some good air condition coming clean air, or we try to have a transition in between. And we try to use sustainably whatever we have. And for that, like Friedman said, environmentalism. In the morning, His Excellency said something, and I will coin another word, environmentalism, that we are running an uncontrolled experiment on the small globe that we have. So we have to think about economic growth, human rights, everything together if we want to safeguard it. In my country, people still have, majority of them use wood to cook their meal, and though to indoor, and a lot of smoke, and they got a lot of diseases of it. And there is a data that many people die because of those indoor smokes. They are the fourth major killer, and they get a lot of problem. And we did not talk much about edible wild plants, the wild vegetable that we get. But if you look at South Africa and other countries, look at the figure that how much they get money and how much people are dependent on the wild vegetable that they are having. Hurdles since morning. My last friend from IUCN in the Middle East, he spoke excellently. The bureaucratical, procedural, political procedure. There are a lot of things on the shelf. We don't work together. This is at least common agenda for all religion and all human being, climate change and biodiversity. We should at least work for them together if we really want to have it. So the lesson learned is that we should have participatory forest management, for example, for non-timber forest products, some allowing people, another thing that we can work. I will be talking a little bit more, a couple of minutes about the endophytic microorganism. Normally, we talk about plants, animals, when we talk about biodiversity, we rarely talk about inside them what is happening. Like your microbiome have thousands of microorganisms, same is with plants. They have a lot of microorganisms, and that can be used for many things. For example, you can use them, and they are all threatened. If you can use them for industry, for medical, you can get antibiotics from them, you can get antiviral from them, from those microorganisms that live within the plant, what we call an endophytic organism. That can be used for plant protection, that can be for bioremediation, that can yield the plant growth. So we have to look for other things also when we work on it. And the recommendation that my friend has already given, but I would be talking one more thing lastly, and that is One Health approach. That if you really want to safeguard the humans, because we are too selfish, I said in the morning. So then you have not only to target only corona now, you have to target ecosystem, human and animal, what we call it One Health. Unless you talk all three together, you will be facing such issues in future many times. That is, you have to deal the whole thing as a One Health concept. And this is the data. How many emerging and even emerging infection diseases we got that are vector-borne in last several years. And if you don't consider that as a One Health, like ecological, environment, economic, and social aspect of all this, we will be having these emerging infectious disease, what we call it EAT. And that will not be that good EAT for us. So if we want to, prevent ourselves from next pandemic, we have to really consider increase of transmission risk. We have to know about what happened in Middle East, for example, SARS, that came from the, camels. So if MERS was there, sorry, from camels. So we have to have One Health approach to save ourselves, sorry. Just a few recommendations. Poor countries are rich in biodiversity. We sell ourselves, our intellectual property as well as these resources. Like in CBD, we have benefit sharing and all this. So we should ourselves try to get add value to it. These are those urgent actions that ICIMOD in this month said for Hindu Kush Himalaya, that we should be working to safeguard this very important region of the world. We should also think about vaccinating on priority the people living in the biodiversity hotspot. They are also, because they interact with wildlife, and that they may, this virus or any other pandemic may go to the wildlife, and that will be a preserve again for you, and you will get an evolved virus again. So we should also think to, vaccinate people that they live in biodiversity rich area. Universities need to change. They should think about, how to be working interdisciplinarity. Very good example of Mahmoud Nasir. He worked on anthropology, on nature, on forest management, and different things. Unless you have knowledge of all this, you cannot really cope with the situation that we have. These are the technologies that are available now. With less land and more yield, we should be trying from genetic stock to cultivation to harvesting, post-harvesting, processing, etc. We should try to focus on modern technology to get maximum out of minimum land. These are different mitigation measures. Since morning, we are talking about it. So we should be really focusing recommendation to the people. And a couple of recommendations to the policymakers, like formulating analytical framework, improving risk communications, and exploring new forms of public and private partnership for preparedness. I close with the comments from the Secretary General of the UN, that the world is facing multiple conflicts driven by famine and worsened by COVID-19 and climate crisis. we have a responsibility to do everything in our power to end violence and alleviate suffering of the people. If we have to have a trustee of the world, we should treat this human being as one unit. Unless we do that, we will be really facing problem. I close with this. I wish we learn from these animals how they behave, and we should be leaders of the world rather than bosses. That will have. Thanks again to the Islamic World Academy of Sciences and COMSTECH, particularly Dr. Abdullah, Iqbal Chaudhry, and others who invited me to speak to you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shinwari, for this very, very good speech. Now we would open the floor for some questions to Dr. Shinwari. Any question?
Yes, may I, Dr. Abdullah, may I ask?
Yeah, Dr. Hanan, please.
Yeah. Dr. Shinwari, thank you so much for, it's really very, very comprehensive that we couldn't follow, you know, it's really a complete package. You mentioned something about some people in some labs that they are playing with the genetic makeup of the Spanish flu or the influenza virus. I don't know if this will be also related to my other point, if I may say directly, how the new technology, evolving advances in new technology like synthetic biology, CRISPR gene editing, and artificial intelligence maybe, how that might be, benefiting biodiversity and how that might be really dangerous in a way that we should avoid. Could you elaborate on this, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Hanan. We have good interaction. It's a really very pertinent question. And this is what I introduced the subject, in Pakistan. Rest of the world, we work with UK, dual use of education. The dual use of education is the synthetic biology has a lot of good to offer, but a lot of bad can happen. Same is with artificial intelligence and everything. Like artificial intelligence played a crucial role in the current pandemic. That you can pinpoint the population, the statistic and everything. But at the same time, your privacy, not only artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, the whole society is, known, your privacy is gone. Everybody knows where are you going now, what are you doing, etc. So these things that even if about the origin of coronavirus, there are still questions. WHO is trying to address this question and having meeting every fortnight telling what really happened. Because it is true that many labs in the world they are working with these microorganisms. I will just use one example that in 2011, a paper was submitted to Nature about the modification of swine flu, or what we call it, this N1H9, the virus. They were trying to look at that time that maybe if it becomes airborne, what will happen? So we should prepare ourselves for vaccine. But the people were worried that if it goes to the wrong hand of terrorist people, this can be a very bad bioweapon for the world. If it is airborne, flu you will be having. And then there was a moratorium. They stopped publishing it for 2 months unless they were told that please don't publish information that are, garage biotechnologists can use it, misuse it. So you are very right. We can have another webinar. I can ask Dr. Abdullah to have a webinar on the frontier technologies and its misuse, dual use of education. That is very important for our region that we have to really talk about it. So there are a lot of worries for this.
Yeah, this is a good idea. I think we will work on it.
Question, please.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Thank you so much. And also thank you for His Highness Prince Al Hassan bin Talal, Professor Abdeslam Humada from the Hassan II Academy of Science and Technology in Rabat. So dear colleague, in the concept of One Health, where there is a close interconnection between animals, human, and also environment and biodiversity. For the prevention of pandemics, is it reasonable to propose that we must have a program of following animals, principally domestic ones, and to develop vaccines and vaccination for animals before transmitting this pandemic or these pandemics to humans. Is it reasonable, my proposition?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Professor, it's a really very good question. And I wish I could have more time and share a few more slides with you. In fact, 3 days back, a publication appeared arguing that what can happen if this coronavirus goes through cats and dogs and your domesticated animals too, and preserve there, and it evolves again and come back to you. So that is that you really need 2 things. One, we still have to work. There are different theories of origin of corona. This was published just 1 week back. I wanted to put it, but the time was really a constraint. 2, that you not only, as I said today, that please also vaccinate the people living near the hotspot area of the biodiversity rich area, not only the domesticated animal. Now the urban area has gone and intruded into the area that are preserved or for wild. Even it can go back to the wild and come back to you. Because the way that we are doing, you may vaccinate yourself for this vaccine, for this corona, but this may, come again to you in different form. Yes. So, because the way that the habits are for food habits, we talk about only 1 beef, but people are eating 1 billion, people are eating insects in the world. We don't talk about them. Lobster that comes from the, sea that we are eating it, and many others. So, and in China, if it is true that what Chinese are saying that in Wuhan, in the wet market it came, that too was from a wild animal that they were eating. So you are very right. When I talk about One Health, again, I mean that we have to consider, we have to think this as a unit. We are too selfish. We human beings are too selfish. We think only about us. And we think when we are in crisis. And when the crisis is over, we forget about everything. So that's very important question. We have to really work on it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello?
Dr. Azhar, please.
Yes. Hello, Zabta Shinwari. Thank you very much for a very exhaustive talk. But I have a question which I have been thinking, and I've tried to treat in my contribution, which I sent to you, which are not fully, is how does the climate change affect the merging of infectious diseases? What's the basis of that?
Yeah.
I have a thought about that. I'll say that after that.
Okay. My teacher, Dr. Asghar, he sends me a lot of material, and I acknowledge that. You're very right. When the temperature increases in the morning, Mahmoud Nasir also pointed out something about the movement of wildlife from less temperature to shifting of them. For example, I give you one example of leishmaniasis, this virus that we were having in the dry temperate mainly earlier, on the higher altitude where less water is there. Now it has come down. When there was a flooding in Pakistan, for example, along with the environmental refugees, they brought this disease also to the plains, and it even reached to Islamabad. So it happens with the climate change, temperature rise, when the wildlife or the microorganism, Professor Hanan is sitting here, they adopt themselves. As I gave you one example of the melting of glaciers, and inside the glacier, there are microorganisms. They are very perfect environment for them to, we keep this in our labs in -80 degrees centigrade. We preserve it for hundreds of years. The microorganisms are part of the genome. So the same thing happened in the natural lab in the wild, in the glaciers. They are preserved there. I gave you example of Siberia that just a few months back, glacier melt, and that anthrax were released from a deer that was that died 2,000 years ago. But today it has a excellent time for that escape for those microorganisms, and a young boy was killed and several deer was infested with that pathogen. So with this temperature and climate change, these pathogens and even higher organisms, they move towards the better environment, like from warm to cold and from cold to warm. It depends on which way the climate change is affecting them. They adapt themselves and they move themselves. Not only the animal, but the plants also. I gave you in one slide the number of speciation that occurs with the temperature rise. That is also, you know, their number increases if the temperature increases. But the quality and its work is a question mark.
What I was trying to say is that when the climate changes, the biodiversity of different densities which are present on the Earth, like it's more dense near the tropics, and when you go away, it's less dense. When you change the climate, increase the temperature, then there's a mixing of the biodiversity of different densities.
Yes.
Which breaks the balance of amongst the different elements of the biodiversity, which causes that. Because in the balanced state, there are elements which cause diseases. They are balanced out by the other element which fight against them. But when you break the balance, then the disease elements take over and you have more diseases.
Exactly. And this is what I told you about the microbiome that you have in your body. When your microbiome lives with you, there are in millions. Even in apple, the apple has 1 million bacteria on its skin, on its sheet. So when you disturb it, when you have some new thing, they fight with each other. You are right. Same is with your microbiome. If you lose your immunity, if your immunity is compromised, the one that is symbiotic for you, they are compromised. You use antibiotic, you kill yourself also, and that is the balance is disturbed, and you have more problems.
So the loss of balance is the main reason.
Of course.
All the best to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, and pleasure talking to you.
All the best.
Can I ask one? Can I speak?
Sayyid Mahmoud Nasir. Abdullah,
yes,
if
please.
You want to permit him. Go ahead, Mahmoud Nasir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Zabta. Like always, you are giving us a lot of insight onto new things. My question here is a very complex situation I have come across recently. It is about polyploidy. Now, I've been in the Cartagena Protocol and CBD, and Cartagena Protocol talks about legislation for transgenic crop. Now we see in the market, so many trees are coming which are polyploid. So heptaploid, instead of a tree giving you timber for which was supposed to give in 16 years, they are giving in 4 years. And it's coming in the market. And when I cross-checked that it doesn't fall under the Cartagena Protocol because it's the same number of same species, only their chromosome numbers have increased. So what is the global situation? What are the legislation? Are there any negative impacts? Or is it okay to go ahead with polyploid trees in particular?
Thank you, Mahmoud Nasser, a very good particular question. This is not only the polyploid species that we have. This is another problem. The GM crops are genetically engineered microorganisms. Now there is a question of CRISPR-Cas9, that when you modify a small piece of within the organism, you don't have transgene. You don't bring gene from other place. What you do is you just cut and paste within one organism. You do with CRISPR-Cas9. Technically, I'm trying to make it simple for other people to understand. And people are thinking it's no more GM because it's not genetically modified in a sense that it doesn't bring genetic material from other species. It is from the same species where you cut and paste or add chemicals to it, ATCG, what we call it. Same is with this. Therefore, the international legislation still has to be for it. With UNESCO, we work. We are trying to have to discuss these issues, ethical issues of this modern technology, frontier technology in synthetic biology, in CRISPR-Cas9, as well as the question that you wrote. But you are very right. Now, as of today, there is not a clear international legislation about these modern happening that is there. Same question was asked. I'm sorry, just one sentence more. Same question was asked about AI, Internet of Things, and some issues that are related with them also. That the ethical questions of the human dignity and human privacy that is being compromised with these modern technology and machine learning, for example. These are the various issues that really we work internationally, how to cope with it. There are more harm sometimes than good. So we have to really be thinking and working on it. Thank you, Dr. Mahmoud Nasser.
Je vais leur demander qu'ils m'envoient les présentations.